It's Tuesday, July 13th. If you were on vacation last week, like Barstool Sports, welcome back. This is episode 168 of the Token CEO podcast. We're presented by Sports Research. I don't know how you guys spend your vacation. I generally spend my vacation going into my vacation. I have grand ambition for all the working out I'm going to do, all the exercising, all the clean, healthy living, all the books I'm going to read, all the things that I've put off that I'm going to tend to. None of that happens. I usually end up parking my ass in a beach chair, which makes me feel like when I get back from vacation, I've got to triple down to get back into shape and get things back on track. Sports Research is a company that can help you do that. Professional athletes from the NFL to the UFC to bloggers here at Barstool Sports use Sports Research. I love their collagen. You can use their vitamins. Some people like Casey Smith are into the waist trimmers. Brianna Chicken Fry is using the Sweet Sweat stick. You can get all of that and more for 30% off if you go to sportsresearch.com and use code TOKEN. Today's episode, we are talking about sin strategies, why sin is a great business, whether it's the alcohol business, the gambling business, and now increasingly the cannabis business, why those are great businesses to get into. Hot tip, people are not perfect. People like alcohol, people like gambling, people like sex, and people also like weed. As the states grow more desperate for cash, you're starting to see sin businesses become more mainstream. We've got two phenomenal women on the pod today. We've got Haneen Davies and Melissa Greenberg. Haneen and Melissa are two of the top executives at a company called Houseplant. You may have heard of Houseplant because Houseplant is Seth Rogan's company. Houseplant does two things. They make pottery and they sell pot. What more can you ask for? As I told these women, that's basically my young adult years growing up in New England. What's fascinating is now pottery looks to be the gateway drug for pot. So it's just a cute little play on words over at Houseplant. But what I've learned from Houseplant is a couple things. One is the marijuana business, the cannabis business in the U.S. is extremely fractured. Two is what these women are thinking about is how do they create a national product, in this case pottery, that enables them to grow a database, enables them to connect with consumers around a lifestyle, enable them to build a brand that has nostalgia and an aesthetic to it, in the hopes that one day they'll be able to sell their product across multiple markets. The third thing I learned is just how big the cannabis business is going to be. We've been kicking around looking at the cannabis business forever. Coley Mick, one of my favorite people at Barstool Sports, used to bug me probably on like a 2-week basis about why we weren't in the pot business. We came up with an incredible brand. I think Barstool would crush the cannabis business. Unfortunately, we've decided on another sin, or two other sins, to be honest with you. We've decided on alcohol and gambling, which we'll stick with right now. What's hard about the sin business is you can't be in all three at all times. It's frankly even hard to be in two at all times or even in parts of one at all times. But what's interesting about Houseplant is what Houseplant is trying to do is not entirely that different from Barstool Sports. They're trying to grow a brand that means something. They're trying to connect with their consumer around a lifestyle. They're not trying to be the biggest or the most buttoned up or the largest platform. What they're trying to do is to create a brand that means something, to give their audience something that they can love and enjoy, and to be associated with very high quality cannabis and to see where it goes from there. So it's very hard to get a job in the cannabis industry. If you want to get a job, whether it's in the cannabis industry, the gambling industry, the sports industry, media industry, finance, you name it, you need a great resume. Top Resume is the world's #1 authority on resume writing. They know just what to do to get your resume seen, noticed, and to help you get a job. The experts at Top Resume provide more than just spell checks and typos. They give a comprehensive review from trusted experts, and then they give personalized recommendations for you on how to make your resume stronger. Find out how your resume stacks up. Go to topresume.com/token to get a free resume review. It's as simple as uploading your resume to their site. You'll get a free evaluation and expert advice on how to make your resume stronger. Top Resume is also giving people who listen to this podcast 15% off their professional resume writing services. So go to topresume.com/token today for a comprehensive resume review and 15% off resume writing services if you want to work with one of their pros. That's topresume.com/token. So this is Haneen and Melissa. So Haneen and Melissa, the first thing I'm going to have you guys do is describe Houseplant, describe your role and how you got there.
Okay, cool.
All right, Haneen, we're going with you first.
Oh, okay. So Houseplant it's a cannabis lifestyle brand. It's rooted in cannabis. And I think what makes it special is that it has two parts. There's house and plants. Houses are homewares, these original goods that are designed for your home, but they keep the cannabis community in mind. But they're really not meant only for cannabis consumers. It's anybody that loves cannabis lifestyle.
Okay.
And cannabis lifestyle for us is it's productivity, it's creativity, it's sleep, it's chill. So there's so many elements of your home and outside your home that can relate to cannabis. And then of course there's the plant, and that's all about curating our cannabis lineup, which Melissa can tell you a lot more about. As for my role, I'm the chief commercial officer. I'm based out of Toronto. And what I do is I lead our global marketing and communications for Houseplant. I also lead the house goods division, which is the homewares division, and our Canadian operations. Because
love it.
We launched the brand in Canada.
First of all, I just want to let you know that I feel like Houseplant is my childhood or like my young adulthood, where there was like all pottery in our house, and then like obviously all I did was like smoke weed every weekend. So this I feel like is the state of New Hampshire and Vermont like manifested in a company. So congratulations on that.
I love it. And you know what? It's a huge part of what the brand is. There's like a bit of childhood in an appropriate way. This is a cannabis brand, but it's like nostalgic. It's like the good old days. It reminds us all of growing up and being around this plant, you know? So there's really
kind of like the nod to the 70s. Obviously, Seth Rogan, a big part of it, you know, founder, celebrity endorser of the brand. Funny to call Seth Rogan a celebrity, but like it's true. But then I think that what I also really love, and then Melissa will kick it to you, is there's something very organic about it. You know, one of the things I want to talk about is your commitment to the product and to the process, but also something that is, you know, it's from the earth. There's a 70s vibe. Like, so I like the way that you're thinking about. It just feels, you know. When Frankie, our producer, was like, hey, it's pottery and pot, I was like, ugh, that's cute. You know what I mean? But it's actually, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense together. So Melissa, talk about your role as the Chief Consumer Officer, how you got here, who you are.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Consumer Officer. I'm based in New York, the only employee in New York, usually spend half my time in LA. I oversee our US cannabis supply chain, all things social impact, so our social responsibility efforts, and then all things digital, so our website and data and things like that, which is super exciting. As you said, we're really focused on the consumer experience. So whether we're thinking about our cannabis and our packaging to the consumer experience online, that's all my everyday and my team. And I got to Houseplant through the acquisition of my company. So I started a female-focused cannabis business back in 2018, and Houseplant acquired it in late 2019. So I've been at the company for the past year and a half, almost 2 years.
That's great. And then Haneen, you come from big places like Pepsi and big CP, like. Was your friend group like, what the fuck are you doing going into cannabis? Or were they like, oh, she's such a pothead, like, of course this is her job? Like,
I am not a pothead. I am more the person that gets like way too high if I'm trying to keep up with Seth or Evan. It's not good for me, but it's amazing. It's funny because it started with friendship for me, actually. Evan and I, Evan Goldberg, went to McGill together. So there's a personal side to this where I was in brand management. I did, as you said, Unilever, Pepsi. I learned like brand management, running a business on somebody else's dime and risk. And then I went over to advertising, and I had left corporate world. I wanted to do something a bit more personal. I wanted to get some skin in the game. So I started consulting for myself and helping smaller businesses and smaller agencies as well. And then Evan got in touch. They were looking for someone to help them build this brand in Canada. They wanted someone based out of Toronto that knows how to build a brand from the ground up, but that they can trust as well. So I joined them as employee number one.
Okay.
And a lot of my friends were like, oh God, it makes sense. I knew it would come back to this because
That's great. Okay, so let's start this. I do want to talk about the business and the product, but my first question, which we have talked a lot about here, we have a podcast called Because They Got High. Rhea, who is one of the hosts of Chicks in the Office, she's a Barstool person, and she is very, very vocal about the stigma around women and pot. So, Melissa, talk to me a little bit about that from your perspective. Like, I think it sucks. I think if girls want to get high, girls want to drink, girls should do whatever girls want to do, is my opinion. Like, I think that's what we've all been working towards and fighting for forever. But what is this stigma, and why do you think it exists?
Well, I think we're doing a pretty good job at trying to knock down that stigma, to be honest. A couple years ago, the reason why I started our business was I went to a dispensary in California a couple years ago and asked the bud tender, what do you have for women? And he pointed us to PMS cream and suppositories. And I was like, don't need something for my vagina. I just want to get high. And it was this moment of, oh, women actually want to get high. And it was clear that at the retail level, there was no education around kind of the different types of consumers. And they were all just expecting this like 19-year-old bro coming in and buying cannabis. I think over the past couple of years, I've seen, especially in California, a lot more female-focused brands. And I think that, the stigma exists because women haven't really been vocal about smoking weed. I think it's becoming a lot more in the public eye. You have big influencers like people like Rihanna and others who are openly smoking, Chelsea Handler and others. And I think there are brands that are coming online that are really focused on the female consumer. Mm-hmm. So you have brands like a few years ago that launched like a Dosis or a Bebo and others that aren't necessarily coming out with flower, but more kind of discreet, beautiful products that are more catered to the female consumer. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll just see more of that as more women enter the space. I mean, there are a lot more women in cannabis than most industries now. And so I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, that's awesome.
As an industry for sure.
So the cannabis business, if I know how to add and read, which sometimes is questionable, is like a $29 billion business. How is, what's your vision for Houseplant in capturing that market? One of the things that I find very interesting about the cannabis industry is similar to the gaming industry or to the alcohol business. State-led, highly regulated, there's tripwires everywhere. The notion of something crossing a state line is tantamount to losing your license and your access. So talk a little bit about, what is your particular worldview as Houseplant or from a Houseplant perspective? And also, is there going to be a national brand, a national product in this space, either in Canada or in the US? So how do you think about both of those things?
Well, I think, Haneen, do you want to talk about house goods? Because I think that really lays the foundation of building a national brand. And then I can speak to cannabis.
Totally. So I would say, number one, the goal is to go national for sure. And I think what's so interesting about house goods for us is just allows us to get into so many more households across the US right now. It allows us to scale a national consumer base. So it is currently a national offering. We sell everything direct to consumer, but we're shipping to 48 states already, or we have shipped in 48 states. And so the idea is, build a national brand through house goods. And then the hope is that will absolutely have us, in many people's homes, earning their trust so that we can scale cannabis when the time is right.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
Regulations and the obstacles that you mentioned.
Okay, got it. And go ahead, Melissa.
I was to say, from a cannabis perspective, we are working with some of the best cultivators in California. And we are an asset-light business. So we rely on in-state cultivators to grow Houseplant cannabis. We're not growing in other states right now because we're being very, very focused on the California consumer. But as Haneen said, we're able to go into other households in other states and think through, where can we find the best cannabis? What products make the most sense in New York versus Nevada? But we've only been in market for a few months. So from a cannabis perspective, we're super, super focused on the California consumer.
And who is that target consumer? Like, do you care about their gender? Like, what's the ethos of your consumer?
don't care about their gender. And I would almost say it's honestly 50-50 for us right now, which is great.
That's a great sign.
I think we appeal to a very wide consumer because house goods span so many different categories. I think you have people that are joining us because absolutely they love Seth and Evan. There's people joining us because they love cannabis. There's people into Houseplant because they love collecting things and beautiful luxury items. So we span a pretty wide consumer base. I think one thing I was going to say to you when you're asking Melissa about females, I think the magic is also to get to brands that are not specifically for females or males.
Yeah, I agree.
God, we need more females in this industry. Like, look at some of the designs out there. We need a female lens to what we're putting out there from communication and design. And I think for us, we've always wanted to be broad appeal, male, female, unisex.
Yeah, broad appeal lifestyle. Like I look at that, we play a big role in High Noon. Like we basically helped put a hard seltzer on the map. I don't know if it's targeted to women or men. It's people who want to drink, between 7 and 15 seltzers, be at the beach, forget about their job, go be with their friends, talk to a pretty girl or a pretty guy or whatever that may be. And I think you guys are kind of the same way. I almost think you could be like Goop of weed.
Oh God, I love you. Also,
High Noon is like our favorite drink. Yeah.
High Noon is so great, right?
It's so good.
What's your favorite flavor?
The one that
I like grapefruit.
Oh yeah, grapefruit?
Was there a pineapple one too?
Yes, there's a pineapple is the number one most popular.
Yeah.
Have you had the peach?
No.
I'm not a big peach person.
Oh, it's delicious. Here's my only thing is you have to add like a titch more vodka to it, and then you like pour it into a glass and like perfect. Yeah. New tropical 8-pack coming out, so this can count as an ad read while I'm doing this. Okay, great. Okay, so you're two female executives in the C-suite. You've got crazy Seth Rogan dancing around, testing the product, being fabulous. When you look at your contemporaries, are you guys the only women in town? Like, are there a lot of other women like you? Like, tell me about the cannabis space. What do the companies in cannabis look like?
Right. It's a good question. I think the cannabis boardroom is very male dominated. And I think I think it's time to change that. And for us, it's changing it from within first and foremost. So at Houseplant, I think our employees are about 70% female. Our leadership team is 50% female. One of our founders is female. So I think, it's a new industry in the sense that we're creating a completely new category. And I think we want to set that, make that difference by setting it straight from Houseplant first,
But at the same time, I think the stats, are around 37% of executives in cannabis are women. And that's higher than pretty much any industry average, which is great. Like it's definitely changing. And I know for me, tons of women reach out to me on LinkedIn wanting advice of how they can get into the cannabis industry. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they need cannabis experience to get into the industry. But it's a wide open opportunity. And there's a lot of us like Haneen and I who are just waiting to mentor people or talk to people to bring the right people into the industry.
That's awesome. And how do you think about, is cannabis going to be like craft beer where there's like 7,000 well-designed boutique cans everywhere? Or how do you, I'll give you an example. I'll take a quick step back, which is, so I used to work in music, and music is a really tough industry because you have large conglomerates. You've got the labels, you've got the promoters, and then you've got all these music managers who are managing 1 to 2 people. It's a small business industry. The majority of revenue, it transacts on a very small basis. How do you think about your industry? Because it is state by state. There is no, there's not the Pepsi of cannabis. I don't think there's going to be the Pepsi of cannabis. Maybe there will be. Actually, that's a good question. I'm curious your thoughts on that. But how do you think about the ecosystem?
I think that there will be kind of the Pepsis of cannabis and the Unilevers of cannabis and like these big companies that come in, because there already are a bunch of multi-state operators who are building up, grows across the country, real estate. And I think I think similar to like the CPG companies of the world, like there's these huge brands, and then there are these direct to consumer brands that come in and completely disrupt everything. And you have, Dollar Shave selling for $1 billion to Unilever. Like, I think that we are going to follow kind of more the CPG model. And I think at the end of the day, the brands that win are going to be the brands that really focus on the consumer experience.
Do you want to be the Pepsi? Like, is Houseplant going to be the Unilever or the Pepsi? Or do you want to be Harry's or Dollar Shave?
I think more Harry's and Dollar Shave, and then we'll get acquired by the Unilevers. Like, I think that we are that focused on consumer. We took a completely different approach coming into the cannabis industry. Most brands that come into cannabis, especially on the celebrity side, are optimizing for scale. There's over 700 dispensaries in California. We're in 17. We have no interest in being in 700. You dilute the brand, you lose the consumer, and so we're pretty focused on building the smaller, more connected brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that. I think if you don't know who your brand is, what you stand for, and who your customer is, and how to delight them, you have to be at such scale, because otherwise no one's going to give a shit about you.
Right. You talked about it the other day around Victoria's Secret. It's a huge business that didn't focus on the consumer experience, and they built products that they thought women wanted. But then you have all these other disruptive brands like NYX coming in saying, this is what women want. And that's, I think of us like that.
You're more like that.
With the consumer. Yeah.
Totally. That's like us with Barstool, right? Where it's like, we know how to talk to a very specific, very large amount of consumers.
Right.
But I'm not trying to run, 24 hours of live sports programming. ESPN isn't as focused on the consumer. They don't have a direct relationship with them. They don't monetize them diversely. You guys are doing both of those things. You guys have talked a lot about the war on drugs and just how you think about drugs in general. Like, give me your point of view. Does cannabis get a bad rap? Is it lumped in with stuff it shouldn't be? Like, how do you think about drug use overall? Should cannabis be treated differently, perceived differently? What's your take there?
The only reason why cannabis has been illegal has all been because of racist reasons. And for us, social impact has been a part of the DNA of the company from day one. And Haneen can speak to it better since she's been here since day one. But Seth and Evan have always recognized their influence and their privilege. They've been celebrated for their cannabis use over the past 20 years, where other people, mostly people of color, have been discriminated against and imprisoned for doing the same thing. And so Houseplant takes the stance of it's our responsibility to right those wrongs, to leverage our platform, educate our consumers about the war on drugs. And I think we all agree, like, it's time to legalize federally. It doesn't make sense that there are people, 40,000 people still in prison for low-level marijuana charges. I mean, it's insane. And that needs to change. I don't know, Haneen, if you have anything to add to that.
No, you nailed it. It's exactly the acknowledgement of our privilege, especially for Seth and Evan, from day one has been super important. Like, we just wouldn't be here if it wasn't for two white males, and that's just the reality. So I think it's just committing our resources, committing our platform, and making choices in terms of the suppliers we work with, the companies we align with. We want to make sure that we're sharing those values with the people that we're bringing into this industry.
Yeah. And this is a plant. I mean, it's organic, and it has great medicinal benefits to it and can really help us all. And it's wild that it's still illegal.
Yeah, what's the Washington take on that?
I think
large sigh.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we work closely with our partners on. We're a part of the U.S. Cannabis Council and work with people or companies like Marijuana Policy Project in talking about policy and cannabis reform, and how do we get some of the bills that are currently in the pipeline passed in an administration that I think we all thought was a little bit more cannabis friendly. And then you find out all these people got fired because they admitted to, smoking cannabis. And it's not exactly what we thought it was going to be, but we have some really great organizations that we're participating in that are trying to move the needle for legalization and reform.
Look, we live it in the sports betting space. Like, I was very hell-bent on us getting into the cannabis space. I think we would murder the cannabis business. I have so many ideas for brands, and I think we speak to people in a very unique way, similar to exactly as you do, but coming at it from a media and an audience perspective first, and a product, whereas you're coming at it, I think, with a little bit both, product first. So, but obviously, you can't be in the sports betting business and be in the cannabis business, and just the pain of having to manage a business on a state by state basis is very painful. And then, I think the other piece is, I think what you have to say about race, the institutional racism in this country being such an inhibitor of progress in a, multi-billion dollar industry is just so interesting. I also think, I think the states are fucked. Like, they need tax dollars. They're going to get it from where are they going to get tax dollars from right now? You're going to get dollars from betting, and you're going to get dollars from cannabis. And so, change is inevitable, and then the federal government's going to wake up on it. So it's so interesting, the space that you're in, because it is so new. Right. It is so ripe with promise. And then it also has this past that is unjust, or in the case of betting, it was considered seedy. That's kind of interesting. Like, sin is such a great strategy.
It is. It's wild. I mean, 80% of cannabis founders are white. And it's sad. Less than 5% are Black. And you have states like New York and Connecticut who are coming online that are making great effort in, reparations and social equity licenses and things like that. But there's still so much that we need to do as a brand and as an industry to help lift up people who have been oppressed by the war on drugs, but also who just haven't had the opportunity to build businesses before. Like, we need cash, we need resources, we need, people to help build these businesses that aren't just going to be these massive multi-state operators.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it.
I could go on and on.
I know, I love this. I'm very interested. Okay, so before I let you go, tell people where they can find you. If I'm going to hop on a plane to California, where should I go? How do I get a great earthenware pottery product? Give us the pitch.
All earthenware pottery products, all our housewares and home goods are on houseplant.com. They can also follow us on Instagram at Houseplant for all that. And then cannabis is at Houseplant US. We have two separate Instagram channels. You kind of have to drive it separately, cannabis and product. And then Melissa, do you want to talk about where they can find which retailers? Or
well, you can go to houseplant.com and put in your zip code, and it'll tell you what retailers carry Houseplant. And you can also buy through our partnership with Amuse that delivers directly to you.
Great.
So
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies, so much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erika.
All right. So anyway, I think what Melissa and Haneen and Seth Rogan are doing at Houseplant, super interesting. I think if you would like to empower yourself with knowledge, you should go look at the war on drugs, and you should look into the racial discrepancies and gender discrepancies in the cannabis business, which are fairly glaring. It will be interesting to see how those resolve. And then you should check out and get yourself a piece of pottery. Who doesn't love a piece of pottery? If you would like to have a great cocktail in the comfort of your own home, Owen's Craft Mixers are Barstool's official cocktail mixer. They give anybody and everybody the ability to make a high-quality cocktail right at home. I like the Moscow Mule. You can get the Transfusion. They're great for people who don't have a clue how to make cocktails from scratch, of which I am one of those people. All you have to do is literally open the can. It's a great product. You pour it with whatever alcohol or liquor of choice you happen to have in your cabinet, in your freezer, on your shelf. And there you go. So get yourself some Owen's Craft Mixers. You can find them at Amazon. You can get Owen's Craft Mixers at CVS nationwide. It is perfect for this season. They're having price drops literally as we speak. So get yourself some Owens Craft mixers. So let's talk about sin industries in general. So sin industries, what I would categorize as sin industries, you've got alcohol, you've got gambling, tobacco, cannabis. The deal with sin industries or sin businesses is that they are state regulated, they're not federally regulated. What the problem with state regulation is, it means that it's a patchwork quilt of regulation. No two states are the same. The rules in Connecticut are different than the rules in Massachusetts, which are different than the rules in New York, and on and on and on you go for 50 states. It remains to be seen about whether regulation will be federalized and whether there will be national regulation, whether it's around gambling, cannabis, tobacco, alcohol, etc. To date, this hasn't happened. The other interesting point about sin industries is that sin industries are very lucrative. So as you look at the states trying to balance their budget, you look at every state is trying to make money, they're trying to make ends meet, they're trying to fund programs, they're trying to not raise taxes. Sin becomes a very effective way to pad the bottom line. We at Barstool really have 3 businesses which are related to sin. I mean, besides like our content, I don't think you would count that as sinful, but some people might. So the alcohol industry, right? The alcohol industry is state regulated. So when we work with companies like High Noon, or we work with Gallo, or we work with Truly or Boston Beer, or really any of our partners, we have to make sure that we are compliant with all state regulation about how that product can be marketed and where you can find it. The rules in New York are different than the rules in Texas, which can be different than the rules in California. The sports betting industry is even more complex. The reason it's more complex is that there are a whole host of issues with state-regulated businesses about money and products moving across state lines. This goes as far as data. So when we think about the Barstool Sportsbook and we think about how we're set up in Pennsylvania or Colorado or West Virginia, not only do we have to think about the laws in each one of those states, we have to think about the regulations in each one of those states. We also have to create the infrastructure whereby money doesn't move across state lines and data doesn't move across state lines. These regulations are constantly under review. They're constantly being managed. They're constantly being discussed. And so as a result, what's interesting is when you think about these businesses, which on their surface are so fun, dangerous, illicit, sometimes bad, these are the companies that employ all the lawyers, because all the lawyers are trying to figure out on a day in and day out basis how to be compliant. Like I haven't said the word compliance as much as I've said in the last year and a half. All I do is hear the word compliance. But it's important because the reality is, to work in the alcohol business, to work in the gaming business, to work in the tobacco business, or to work in the cannabis business, you have to have a license. Licenses are finite. Licenses are precious. Licenses are privileged. Licenses can be revoked. And so as a result, all of these businesses are trying to grow. They're trying to scale. They're trying to do the same thing, which is to drive more sales, to drive a lower cost of acquisition. But they're trying to do so in a way that keeps them compliant with state-by-state regulation, which in many cases is evolving and changing. And so, I think one of the challenges of this, like we're definitely a company that moves fast and breaks things. It's hard to move fast and break things when you're in a heavily regulated business. To be honest, one of the biggest frustrations we have with Penn is we want to move so fast. We want to roll out everywhere right now. We want to be able to be infinitely creative in the messages that we create, in the products that we developed, in the promotions that we drive. But the problem is there's so much bureaucracy and there's so many different bureaucracies that it's hard to move fast and break things when you have to check not only with one boss or one regulator or one constituent or one entity, you have to check with 5, 10, 15, and 20. And that's one of the things that I think is really challenging in this business overall. It's also hard to get efficiency. You look at why are DraftKings and FanDuel so formidable in the sports betting space. It's because daily fantasy was legal, I think, in 49 states or 48 states. They have national brands. They have national databases, and now they're just localizing those with their sports betting offering. When you look at cannabis, one of the interesting things that Haneen and Melissa in particular had to say is that they think there is going to be a big national brand. They think there's going to be the Target and the Walmart of cannabis. But the reality is it's going to take a long time to get there because the company that's going to become prevalent in every state has to find a different offering to be able to scale across state lines. And so the tension of how do you play within the rules? How do you manage regulation and still have a very creative and a dynamic and exciting business? That's a challenge. And then the second challenge is how do you make the money work? If you can only sell your product in California, there's only so much money you can make. How do you figure out how to grow your brand on a national basis, sell a national product, and then make something stick on a state-by-state basis? That, I think, is a really interesting business challenge for anyone involved in the sin industries. So the net on this is, one, it's expensive to be, one is, we had this friend who moved from New York, who was like an equity trader, moved from New York to Colorado to get into the pot business. That was a bust. So he ended up running a liquor store, one of the best humans alive. But one of the things that I think is really interesting right now in cannabis or in alcohol or in sports betting is that there's all sorts of entrepreneurs, all different types of people who are trying to get into these businesses and realizing just how hard it is to break through. And the reason it's so hard to break through is, one, it's nearly impossible to scale. Two, the licenses are all locked up. And three, it's very hard to make money and more importantly, very hard to drive a profit when you are regulated to a very finite space. That's it for today's episode. You can subscribe to the podcast, leave us a rating, or give us a review. You can call our voicemail line at 440-462-1729. You can also watch this episode on YouTube, join our Facebook group, follow us on LinkedIn or TikTok, or check us out at Token CEO or EKA Nardini, wherever social content is found. And that's it.